you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm introducing today's spotlight speaker for a 5-minute introduction of their organization related to affordable housing. And today, Ms. Lexie Vaughn is going to talk a little bit about Durham Habitat. Ms. Vaughn's been with the organization for a short amount of time and has a long history of working with Peace Corps and banks and tech companies and other nonprofits along the way. Glad to have her with us today. Is Lexie here? If Lexie's not here, maybe we can come back to her. Lexie, are you here?
Dick, I'll try and text her and check in.
Thanks. And if we're coming back to her, then we're moving on to our program. And introducing that is Brianna, right?
Hi, everyone. So I just uploaded the coalition agenda for today onto the chat feature now that everyone is on. And that will give you an idea of what we are going to be doing today. So our guest speakers are the Executive Director of Urban Ministries of Durham, Sheldon Mitchell, and the Executive Director of Community Empowerment Fund, Donna Carrington. And they're going to be talking to us about homelessness in Durham, especially around emergency funding and plans that people have and all of those things. So just a reminder, please, we're going to do this Q&A style. So please keep your questions in the chat. So when it's time for the question and answer section, we can make sure that your questions are seen and shared. All right. So we have some questions we wanted to ask the both of you, and feel free to introduce yourselves a little bit more. Anyone who is not speaking, please keep yourselves on mute. All right. So in June, oh, and Terry Alaba is also here with us as a resource. Thank you for being here, Terry. He helped put together today's discussion. So we had an update in June around how emergency funds for homelessness were being utilized, such as hotel leasing and stays to ensure social distancing, as well as rapid rehousing to reduce numbers at the shelters. So for both you, Donna and Sheldon, what's being done now, especially since the state of emergency looks like it will continue for several more months and we know more about what's going on?
Sheldon, did you want to go first? So I can, that'll be great. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to have the opportunity to come and just share some updates with you regarding activities at Urban Ministries of Durham during this time of COVID. I know as Brianna just said, you guys are up to date on some of our various activities, but upon our return back to shelter, I'm going to pick up there. We have reduced capacity. So as many of you know, Urban Ministries is a congregate shelter environment, which definitely precipitated our initial move from there earlier in April to establish more ability for social distancing and other mechanisms to keep people, our residents, safe during that time. Upon our return, though, that meant that we would have reduced capacity. So previously, our capacity was 148 individuals that we were able to serve. Now, our current capacity is down to 82. And that's men, women, and families at this point. So there was great concern about the reduced capacity. Also, there was great concern as we looked at our return around those that might be medically fragile or have other morbidity issues related to COVID. So we were definitely pleased that the county stepped forward to help us establish another alternate site, which is now at Carolina Duke Inn for those who are medically fragile. We vary anywhere from another 37 to 40 individuals that are able to be housed at that location at this time. And we're very thankful to have that space. However, that does present some challenges for us because that means increased staffing needs to be able to staff a second location. Also, all the other logistical challenges that go along with that, from laundry to meals, security, etc. So that's been pretty challenging. Things have, as I was mentioning to Brianna a little earlier, things have somewhat normalized or at least gotten into a routine. But now maintaining a second site definitely puts additional strain on staff because we found it pretty challenging to recruit new staff that are going to be able to fulfill the duties that we need. And also we've seen that it's been pretty challenging to hang on and retain staff during this time. We utilize a lot of part-time staffers. So we find that we've had college students in our mix who many of which have returned to college. Also, there's oftentimes educators that are a part of that group, and schools started again. So we lose those folks. And then other folks that really just maybe have not been as comfortable continuing employment as the crisis sort of lingers on and carries on. So that's been a challenge. But as we've looked at it and tried to keep our focus really on being adaptable and also working as a team. And within that, we've tried to make sure that we're keeping communications up with our partners, with our volunteers and donors about the various activities that we have ongoing at Urban Ministries. We've also really tried to put an emphasis on just focusing on the things that we can control. So as we have those basic services in play, how do we ensure the case management continues? How do we ensure the workforce services can continue? And for example, we've been working with Alliance just on virtual mental health, making that accessible so residents are still able to be connected to that vital service during this time. And we continue to do that in partnership. Also, just with our workforce activities, we've been able to help probably 30 or more individuals with filing for their unemployment. They've also been able to assist a couple dozen people with their income tax filings. And so we just continue to try to focus on the things that we are able to continue to provide and work to have those be in a consistent and coordinated fashion. One of the larger things that we're in the midst of now is really, this seems that it's going to be with us for some additional months or time. And so we're in the midst of a planning process now that will really add a focus to our activities and efforts, say for the next 12 to 18 months. What do we really need to be focused on? Because we can always get caught up in all the urgencies of the day or the week, but we know we still want to be able to be impactful on our typical goals and indicators, but also what are the needs of the moment that we need to react to and figure out how we can adjust our services, look to stand up additional services that may be needed, or other partnerships, really to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our residents, but then also needs that are within the community. So I'm going to stop on that one.
Thank you. What about you, Donna? Donna, did you have anything else you'd like to add? Let me see. She might be frozen.
Like it's frozen.
Okay, thanks. All right, Sheldon, while Donna logs back on, we can move on to the next question and then, or maybe answer a question in the chat and then see when she comes back on. All right, so have there been any transportation problems? This is from Jim Svara, for users of the alternate site?
So there were some challenges in relation to some of the folks who needed to get to their places of employment. So we were able to, one, provide some bus passes. Also, I know that Rapid Transit was able to reactivate a bus stop that was closer to the location where we initially were. And then our workforce team has also been able to organize van rides for folks to get them transported to work when that's called for. And we've also utilized Uber as well to help make that transition for folks to be connected and still be able to get to work.
Thank you. And we have another question. Have you had to turn people away from the shelter as a result of having less capacity available?
So, I mean, there does continue to be a waiting list at coordinated entry. However, as far as singles is concerned, I don't think it's any larger at this time than what we typically see throughout the operation of the year. I know at one point for families, so many of you, or probably most of you, would know that we serve as a secondary provider for families. We have 9 family rooms that we are able to provide. And I know at different points that list was pretty high, but you know, I heard the positive news on last week that now I think it was down to only maybe 18 families, I think, who were on that waiting list. So there's been tremendous progress that's been made in that respect.
Thank you, Sheldon. So Donna said she's having some significant problems with Wi-Fi. So Terry, can I please call on you?
Yes, you may. What's the question?
All right, so did you have anything you wanted to add to the first question? Just basically what's going on now, especially since the state of emergency looks like it's going to continue. And then we'll move on to the second question really quickly.
Well, a couple of things. I do want to mention in Families Moving Forward, which has reduced its capacity at the onset of COVID-19 from 21 to 17 families, which allowed them to practice social distancing for the families, but that also reduced the number that was served. And so they did not join Urban Ministries at the hotel because they were able to kind of refit the current shelter site. So they have been a very important partner in this response. And I would say the addition of the Carolina Duke Inn as an alternative site for people that are the most highest at risk has been very helpful in terms of keeping that same social distancing possible that was at the Marriott Hotel early on a little earlier in the crises. That is being operated by Reinvestment Partners. And there are various, in response to one question, social workers there and staff on site. And they're also, I had a conversation that they're looking to refine that and getting even more coverage there now. So I think in terms of crisis response, there's so many good things that Durham has done to adjust to the crisis that's been before the community. And I'll pause there.
So Brianna, I would add a couple other items. I guess Terry made me think of this. Another positive thing I think that's happened is really Terry helped us with the group to put together an operations manual about midway of our move. And that was very helpful because we said we've got a blueprint to document at least our procedures and processes. And as we look to set up the Carolina Duke Inn, then that was very helpful because we already had the blueprint in place for us to make that transition yet a second time to establish a secondary location. Also for us, that we do operate the community cafe in which we provide meals not only to our residents, but also to anyone from the community needing a meal. And so we do continue to provide probably 100 to 125 meals for each meal service to individuals from the community, but that's just in a to-go fashion at this point. And we were fortunate to have a partnership come about with Food Bank, and now every Tuesday we're also distributing box food items. And we've been able to go up to 150 households for each service on that day. And that's been very helpful because we had to close down our food pantry due to the lack of volunteers to help out with that operation.
Great. Thank you, Sheldon. So our next question, I'm going to kind of combine two of them for the sake of time because the last question I think is pretty important. So what have been some positive outcomes and tools to come out of using these emergency funds and programs? And how have you learned from other communities handling COVID-19 response, especially any lessons that would be learned from Durham? And Donna's been texting me. So she said some positive outcomes are that organizations are finding collaborative ways to work together, like CEF and Housing for New Hope did a rapid impact project that housed people with barriers in our community, which is actually pretty wonderful. So Sheldon and Terry, do you have anything else you'd like to add for that question?
So I was going to say that as well. That's been a positive, the rapid rehousing and the work that they've been able to do. We had many individuals to benefit from that process. Also, again, establishment of the secondary housing location for those that are medically fragile, that's really been tremendous and very helpful. We've also had regular testing as a part of being able to partner with public health, Lincoln, as well as Duke medical staff. And so we do that about every 2 weeks now. So that's very helpful as we go through the process in terms of keeping people safe. And then there's also just been funding in relation to being able to help us with getting PPE and other food and basic necessities just for the day-to-day operations, so that those things have been positive. In terms of lessons learned, we really have just tried to focus in on the CDC recommendations and, implement those things as we're best able to here on our end. And that's been the thing that we've tried to stick with the most. Did I get all the questions answered there?
Terry, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think Sheldon and Donna have spoken to that very well. Thank you.
I do too. All right. And then our final question is, based on your experiences, what are some important next steps for Durham? Yes.
Okay. So definitely think it was great that we had the response and recovery task force developed, but also know that with the specific challenges around housing and homelessness, probably would be great to have some type of working group. That's our advising group that continues to work on the policy and practices within our local community to address that, because this is definitely, although it'll be a shorter term thing, we know that it will have longer lasting impacts on our entire system. And I think there's probably lessons that have been learned that can be worked to put in play to help improve our system going forward. Also, through Community Engagement Fund, we know they're doing landlord engagement. That's definitely something that needs to be continued and I think strengthened, because one of the things we've seen as we've had to try to work more and live up to more of the housing first strategy of getting people in, we've got to have places for them to go. So being able to continue to advance the landlord engagement and resources there to help that effort be more successful would be beneficial. Also, as we again think about affordable housing just within the community, how are we able to more quickly stand up or bring online those affordable housing options? Because again, as we know that congregate environments are not the best as we think about people's health and safety, how can we get them into those affordable housing opportunities more quickly as a first step? And let's see, I thought I had one more thing I wanted to say there. Oh, and I just finally, as we're still in the midst of this crisis, thinking about the location for those who do test positive. I know that we have a location now, but with any outbreak of significance, it would quickly be filled. And we would again be faced with a challenge. So I know that's something that's been very difficult to address and bring online. And I'm glad that we do at least have a location, but from a capacity standpoint, I don't know that it would be adequate given any potential outbreak that might happen within the homeless community.
I want to add a little bit there to what Sheldon has said. In as much as Durham has done such a great job as it often does, responding to crises, mobilizing some forces, and really demonstrating its compassion, steep compassion for those who are living on the edge, those who are living most vulnerable, those who are sick, and those most likely to catch and potentially die from COVID. There's also been some gaps in how things have proceeded, and I'll just touch on this briefly, and it will lead into the ask that I think Don and Sheldon and I are hoping to make to the coalition. There was a total of $4.7 million either sent to Durham or set aside for Durham in terms of COVID-specific, COVID-19 response funds to homelessness. And certainly the county commissioners acted quickly on securing the hotel and some of that anticipated money that comes from the federal government, often through the state, but sometimes directly to Durham, is going to be used for that. But with that kind of amount of funding that's been set up for response, which is great, what has not happened was the development of a plan for how Durham is going to utilize that money to hit its targets in terms of where the most vulnerable, how we're doing. And we've had, unfortunately, a kind of more of a piecemeal approach in response, which is, to be very honest, is quite common in crisis response. The Emergency Operations Center set up by the county certainly has stepped up, and it is geared, though, more toward things that are immediate, day-to-day, deal with it, and then the crisis is gone. It's not a longer-term sort of, usually it's meeting a lot, and it's been a lot longer than I thought it would. So we've all been kind of caught short by how long COVID-19 and its impacts upon the homeless population is carrying forward. And so because of that, there's been a certain lack of voice in the public platforms and in public decision-making around how the COVID funds would be used. And when I say that, is that haven't heard as much as been needed from people like Donna and Sheldon in that conversation to help develop that plan, to help target where the money would be used, to target where the best places it's been. Now, fortunately, that has not kept work from happening and things have moved forward, but it's really showed a shortcoming, I think, in the kind of operating system of how Durham responds to homelessness in this case, particularly a crisis such as COVID-19. And so that also has been a concern to the various working groups that I've served on, that at times it may not have been intended, but decisions have felt very much like a top-down thing without taking into account the observations and insights of people on the front lines. So, well,
thank you. I am back. We had a internet outage in our building. I definitely would agree with what Terry is saying. It's interesting to me because I weighed between Durham and Orange County as far as dealing with two different COCs and seeing how this is operating. And when I'm in Orange County conversations, the one thing that I have appreciated is there is a working group of all stakeholders that are committed to meeting, that are committed to looking at the gaps. They're committed to addressing how the gaps look differently in COVID maybe than they do in normal gaps analysis and how to address that. An example of that is some of the COVID funding that first came to Orange County went to form a new street outreach team. And not only was that funding for the street outreach team, it was made by a decision of a whole program committee, and community stakeholders were asked to be part of the hiring, even though it was going to be situated in one central area, which is, it's under the, it's actually two. One is under the criminal justice resource and one part of it is under the housing department. It was important to have real stakeholders that these people would be connecting with in that hiring process. And so I think having community involvement is important. I think having people in the community that are doing some of the direct service work and some of the also higher level work in conversations makes sense. One thing that I've been asked to talk about also that probably hasn't been talked about is the effect of what COVID has done to a nonprofit. So for us, there was
I think Donna froze again. We can give it just a second. And if she's kicked off again, we'll move on to questions. All right. So Donna has had some experience with, excuse me, some experience with COVID-19 herself. She actually caught it early into this process. And so the Community Empowerment Fund has had to make several adjustments over several months in order to properly be able to address the things they need to address. And several other nonprofits have had to do the same. So she was going to share a little bit more about that. But I do not see her on here. So we are going to move on to Q&A. Please put your, oh, yes, great. Also, if Sheldon, you had anything to add about the impacts of COVID-19 further than what we've already said, on nonprofits, that's great. Oh, Donna, you're back. Never mind.
My building
going
is
with, like,
horrible.
Plan D.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry. So in the middle of this, I also, as an executive director, got COVID and had to figure out a response for myself, also as to how to deal with this, how to have my staff deal with this. And what I learned is flexibility. What I learned is to try to think somewhat ahead, and also to not expect that you're going to have all the answers, because the minute you have the answer, it changes. All that saying that I think that our preparation for COVID wasn't, because we didn't expect it, but the flexibility that we need to have in order to think about what's best for our community means that we have to think about what it's like for the people on the ground. I am a person of lived experience. That is the first part of me that I lead with. I have been homeless in Durham system. And so the way I think about it is the care that I would have wanted for myself and the care that I would want for our residents. And we have to be intentional about that, because COVID is affecting and coming at people in our community in so many ways. And we have to figure out the ways that we can address things so that people know where to go and have some resources. But also, this isn't something that's going to go away. And we need to think about, even in its best iteration of where, you know, it's not affecting people as much, there's a vaccine that might work for some, there's still going to be a level of this in our life. And how do we make sure that from now on, the way that we can care for our residents in our community says that we're making plans to try to plan for what we can and to be flexible about what we can't.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move into questions now. So I'm just going to start with the first questions that haven't been answered yet. So Rita, your question was answered in the chat. And then we have the next question of, have your safety practices been effective, and have any residents tested positive for COVID? And I believe that was directly for Sheldon, but for you as well, Donna, have any of your members tested for COVID? How have safety practices been effective?
So our safety practices are none of the people that have interacted with our members have tested positive, nor have our members that have been engaging with us have tested positive. We have been very intentional in our protocol, not only with having screening questions that we ask people ahead of time. We are also screening our advocates, we're screening our staff, we're taking temperatures. We are very much an organization that is saying, if you don't feel well, please don't come to work. And that has been hard. You know, that leaves the numbers of people sometimes down. But we haven't had a problem so far. We're distributing hand sanitizer. We made sure our office is set up so that people can be 6 feet apart. And we're always thinking, is there a place of where we could do better? So we are also covering everything that we give people in plastic covering that we can wipe down. We have been very solid in the way that we're treating this. Particularly, I think for me, it is very important that we make sure that we're not someone that would be spreading.
So I would say all of what Donna just said, we work to follow those similar practices at Urban Ministries. For us, prior to our return from the Marriott, we started testing, and that was when it was discovered that we did have 3 individuals that ended up testing positive during that round. 2 of those were residents at the Marriott at the time. And then we had another individual to test positive that was at the Carolina Duke Inn. And so we've just continued to work to have regular testing. Fortunately for us, we haven't seen any other positive tests since our return. And we haven't had any positives at the Liberty Street location, which of course is the congregate site. So we feel like the cleaning and disinfecting, along with the other protocols, have been working and been successful there. And staff, we just try to be diligent about having people to wear the mask, to keep their social distance. We put in a lot of different barriers and other measures to help protect the residents, whether it's in the cafe or on their bunks, where we've got additional protective barriers on their beds, just whatever we could do to try to make the environment safer. And so far, those things seem to be working.
Great, thank you. And then I think the next question I saw was, how has the CDC eviction moratorium changed housing and emergency funding services for the last few weeks?
I think the way that we've seen it show up is this very much a lot of confusion around it. And so us having to be really solid in how we're explaining what needs to be done in the moratorium. So at first there were a lot of people that thought that this was an automatic thing, and it is not. You actually have to fill out a declaration statement and give that to your landlord. I'm actually waiting to see how it plays out with landlords. We haven't had anyone yet to engage with the process to see how a landlord's going to receive this. But we have been very diligent in explaining that this is something that you have to make the declaration of. You have to make sure that you fit the eligibility, even though it does not say that you have to have proof. But we also say to them, it would be nice if you do, just in case for some reason this comes up. And so that's been the way we've been explaining it to people. We have a couple of relatively short FAQs around it that we've received, and that has been really helpful for people to engage with that.
All right. I think we have one more question. I think this is directed towards Sheldon. How often are you able to COVID test your clients? And also, when might there be some more availability soon for beds? Oh, Sheldon, I see you saw that. Never mind. 2 weeks.
Yeah, so availability remains the same. I mean, if people go through coordinated entry, we have people entering and exit daily at this point. In regards to testing, so we do have a schedule set up where we're testing every 2 weeks, and it could be more frequent. So going back to what I said about the positive case, so for example, there may be somebody that's missed because they're at work or not there, or somebody that maybe is hesitant about being tested. However, if there's a positive case, then now there's more people are more compelled and not ask to then follow up. So we do it every 2 weeks, and then more frequently based on the recommendations of the medical staff.
And our last question, are there additional challenges for families with school-age children, given the challenge they're having to go to school this fall?
The way that this has showed up in our organization is I've seen a lot of parents that are having to be out of work to adjust to these schedules. I have been lucky in the fact that because I am doing some work from home, that I've had the ability to be with my own child trying to struggle with this. So I can just imagine what it's like for people with younger children. She's 16. with younger children to have to figure out how to keep them engaged, how to keep them, on track, keep up with what they're doing. So that has made things particularly challenging because when people are out of work, then there's no incomes. Then how are they paying for their rent and their utilities, and how are they getting food? So it's a trickle down effect, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think as a parent, I particularly feel safer with my child not being at school, just because I know that she may be a person that might not have symptoms. She didn't get symptoms. She was negative when we were tested, but could pass on to a teacher. And would I want that to happen? No. So it's been that kind of struggle that I think I'm seeing a lot of parents ask, how long are we going to be doing this digital learning? Are we ever going back to school? What does going back to school look like? So yeah, I think that's particularly challenging for the children and for the parents.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Donna, Terry, Sheldon, for your wisdom. Thank you, Drew and Tasha, in the comments. If you all need some more information, they've been posting quite a bit in the chat. I'm going to turn this back over to Dick. So for updates and all of those things. So virtual round of applause. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brianna. We have a number of ongoing topics that we're following. Some of them have been going on for a year or more that we try and do a monthly update on. And let's see, I'll first call on Jim Savara to talk about the tax assistance grant effort.
Okay, thank you all for what you have done to promote tax assistance to reduce property tax bills for very low income families. Our proposal was not accepted in part because of what we considered to be inappropriate advice from the county attorney's office that this was not permissible for counties to do, despite the fact that the city of Durham has a grant program that returns a portion of property tax already. But what the county had developed as an alternative is a deferred payment approach that will require people or permit people to pay only 4% of their income toward their property tax bill. Now, to give you an example, a household with an income of $20,000 and a house valued at $140,000 would have a tax bill this year of $1,750. Now, with that 4% limit, they will have to pay $800 toward that bill. And that still is going to be a substantial payment for them. We'd hope for more, but it does cut the bill more than, cut it by more than half. Issues with the program are that the deferred payment has to be repaid when the house is sold, and the amount deferred as well as interest. And what we would hope to do in the future is to try to get a way to reduce the number of repayments that are required, or to explore an alternative to the deferred payment approach. In part, I think it's going to depend on how the legislative elections come out this year as to whether there's some room for maneuvering in the legislature. The city is going to be endorsing participation in the program at their meeting tonight. We will talk at the policy committee next week about, I hope, about how we can help spread the word, help people apply for the program. Just one other quick related note, the city has extended its longtime homeowners grant program to cover taxes paid, extra taxes paid in 2019. Up to this point, they're talking about a deadline at the end of the year, and I think we need to look at how we can make people understand that they can get some help for last year's taxes as well as applying for the deferred payment for the current year. So that's the current situation. But again, thanks to everybody that pushed the idea. We did get action, and that reflected the encouragement that came from this broad coalition supporting tax assistance.
Thanks, Jim. If you got any questions for Jim, you can put the question in the chat as well. Let's see. Now calling John Talmadge to talk about the public equity transit campaign.
Thanks, Dick. Hi, as you remember, last month, this group endorsed the idea of the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit joining the Transit Equity Campaign, and we publicly launched it together with Bike Durham, the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People, Durham Congregations in Action, and People's Alliance at the beginning of September. I'm going to put in the chat links where you can get more information about the campaign and can sign up either as an individual or an organization to get more information and to participate in activities. We expect that the next round of engagement on the public Durham Transit Plan will begin next week, and it'll be around what are the goals and objectives for the plan. And so we're very interested in making sure that they're targeted around improving the system for the people who use it today, transit workers, and residents of Black and brown neighborhoods of Durham. We would also love it if there are opportunities to come speak to your organizations virtually, of course. And so you can contact me either in the chat or afterwards. I'll also put my email address in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, I'm going to do a brief update on a package of zoning amendments that's been working through the process, I guess, for at least a year and a half now. Initially initiated by Jim Anthony, who's a developer, and was concerned about restrictions in Durham's current regulations related to use of land and density, and for added incentives to the existing affordable housing density bonus program. Also included in his package was modifying the definition in the ordinance of how many unrelated individuals are allowed to reside in the same household. That has been working its way slowly through the process and went to the Planning Commission. Very start of the year, got deferred. Planning Commission set up a study committee that met a number of times, and it came back to the Planning Commission in revised form, I believe in August. They made some recommendations to move it on, and the planning staff says that this matter is now set for public hearing, going to City Council at their meeting on October 19th. The coalition has had particular interest in two items on this. One is we would like to see a relaxation of the number of unrelated individuals that are allowed to be in the same household. Currently, the maximum is 3 persons, and this current proposal would allow it to go up to 5 persons, which is a significant relaxation of it. We have so many different blended communities around town now that we don't want to have that overly restrictive definition in place. Secondly, the earlier versions of this proposal included reductions in tree coverage and buffer areas, and just because of protests from the community on that, particularly at the Planning Commission hearings, those have been completely removed from the proposal now. So the coalition in general has felt pretty comfortable with the proposal moving forward. But we'll continue to monitor it and keep you apprised of things. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to pass them along. But the latest is October 19th, going to City Council public hearing for adoption of those amendments. Thank you. And let's see, if Larissa is on the call, Larissa or someone, could we please get an update on the Braggtown rezoning matters?
We have two leaders of Braggtown, I think, on the call, Vanessa Mason Evans and Constance Walker. Vanessa?
Yeah, hi, it's Constance Wright. We're still working with the city council members. We haven't gone up against them yet. That meeting will be coming up on November the 16th. Right now, we're trying to do our strategies of how we want to approach them. The developer doesn't want to work with us at putting in affordable houses. The last meeting we had with them, they wanted, the highest they went at that time was 20. They started out at 10 houses, and then they proposed 20 houses, but we told them that was like a slap in the face. I have gotten an email where I think they're talking about maybe going back with city council and saying they want to put in 30. But to me, 30 is still not going to be enough houses to put in when you want to put in between 700 to 900 houses in the development, which is going up. So we're just hoping that we'll get the same no's from city council that we got from the city county planners, commissioners, with our unanimous no. And again, we're still just working out how we want to strategize and go up against them. And we're just asking everybody that has supported us in the past to continue to support us through the signing the petition, asking people to go on, go into the emails of the different city council members and let them know their concerns, not just about Braggtown, but all of Durham and how we want to see Durham not just have these extreme mega houses and no affordable housing, because everybody's got to have a place to live. Every human being deserves a place to stay that's warm and comfortable and safe. So our strategy is, yes, when we started out, it was about Braggtown, but overall, we're talking about all of Durham, having spaces and places for everybody to live that's affordable. So that's where we're at right now. So hopefully, and then hopefully by the next meeting we'll have something more laid out and more concrete. I think I've asked my subcommittee to also, Constance and I have asked them to send out a slide of our presentation from the city county planning commissioners so that every community can get a feel of what we did to get to where we got to, so that they can start doing the same thing. And one of the things I've been telling everybody, with the way the developments are going and what they've done in the past, they don't connect with the community. They just go down to the city planning commissioners, they talk to them, they get their stuff pushed through. But the reason why I guess some of our stuff was able to get halted was because we were already in the process of trying to make sure we had a subcommittee on new developments in our area. So I think every community, every association, if they don't have an association, they need to gain an association. But they need to have a new development team that can go downtown, look at the plans that's being done, jump ahead of these people so that they can be able to take it back to their community, so they can be able to tell their community what's going on. Because in the past, we have been in the dark, but Braggtown has kind of like brought the light out so that hopefully other communities can do the same thing we're doing.
Thank you, Vanessa.
That's my report.
Appreciate that. Okay, I got a note that Sheldon and Donna have one more announcement they want to make that got left out of their presentation. Brianna, do you want to coordinate that?
Hi, just as we were talking about the funds and plans and things like that, Sheldon and Donna, I think you had an ask you wanted to make.
Yes. We were asking the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit and their supporters to recommend to the city and county that Durham develop a plan for at least the next 9 months that addresses identified service gaps and includes funding priorities with the remaining unspent COVID-19 funds, taking into account representation and feedback from Durham practicing experts around homeless response.
Thank you both. Back to you, Dick.
Okay, let's see. Is Lexie Vaughn with us online at present?
Yes, I am on the line. Thank you.
Hi, Lexie. Glad you're with us.
Hi.
Wondered
my
if you
goodness.
could take just a couple of minutes to tell us about Durham Habitat. I know many of us know something about it, but both introduce yourself and talk about a little bit about Habitat.
Yes, thank you so much. So first of all, I apologize for coming late to the call and for phoning in and not being in on Zoom. I've been having technological issues the past several days, so I am happy to be here by phone at all. So thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for the invitation to address the group. I am Lexie Vaughn. I've been the CEO at Durham Habitat since the end of April, so fairly new to the position, and nothing like starting a new job with a new industry for me in the middle of a pandemic. But we've been moving forward. For the past 30 or so years, Habitat Durham has been working throughout the community to create affordable home ownership opportunities for families in the area. You probably all know Habitat for Humanity by its reputation and by its brand. There are several Habitat affiliates in the area: Wake County, Durham, Orange and Chatham, just here in the Triangle, but we focus exclusively on Durham. We're a staff of about 25 to 30 people. We're growing just a little bit, picking up our activity, and we build about 20 to 25 houses a year throughout Durham. We have been focusing primarily on central Durham, but we are starting to branch out quite a bit as land becomes more and more expensive and harder to come by. But we are committed to serving the Durham community. We focus primarily on households in the 30 to 60 AMI range, and again, creating affordable home ownership opportunities. We're not, although we do have a couple of rental properties at this point, we are not really a player in the affordable rental space. We focus on home ownership opportunities. As you probably also know, our model is contingent upon the involvement of volunteers in the building process. We have been very challenged during this COVID period. We had to suspend our volunteer operations a couple months ago. My plan is to start phasing volunteers back in once we enter phase 3 of our COVID public health policies here in North Carolina. So we're here at 2.5, so we're planning a sort of a staged, controlled phase-in of volunteers with new safety protocols to see how that goes. But that is very much a part of how we engage the community, how we manage our expenses, and how we show our overall support for the community and what we build. So our work, I'm sorry, I'm talking really fast because I feel like I'm probably at the end of the meeting here and between you and lunch. But some of the big projects that we have going on right now that probably the most notable that you can see is on Laurel Avenue. We are in the middle of a big project with the Durham Housing Authority. I don't know if Anthony Scott is on the line, but thank you, Anthony. Anthony and some of the other DHA folks just attended our first dedication for a house on Laurel Avenue that is part of this project. That is a collaboration between us. And all there will be 37 lots on Laurel Avenue, and then on Morning Glory and Plum, a total of 37 in all of those. And that's a big project for us. Like I said, we build about 22 to 25 houses a year. So those 37 lots represent about the next 1.5 years worth of work for us, which is great because it gives us time to think about what comes next. And we also have a big lot out off of Junction Road. We call it Hope Crossing 2. Hope Crossing 1 is a neighborhood that was finished about 12 years ago. But Hope Crossing 2 is probably another 100 lots that we're looking at developing that sometime after we finish this DHA project. And so what we want to do is do whatever we can to increase our capacity to serve the community, because we know that the 20 to 25 houses a year that we build and offer for affordable home ownership is a drop in the bucket. We know that there's demand and need out there for what we do, and we want to try to increase our capacity. So the partnership with DHA, a potential partnership with perhaps a commercial builder and Hope Crossing are things that can help us increase our capacity and increase the number of affordable housing units that we have available to the community. So I know that people kind of vaguely know who we are. We don't give houses away for free, which is one of the myths that we always dispel. Our homeowners actually purchase our homes. They invest sweat equity, and they buy the houses with a mortgage that we offer. But it is something that I know that all of you at least know in passing, and I'm happy to have spent a few minutes telling you about who we are here in Durham and what we're doing in the community. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lexie. Glad you're with us today.
Thank you.
Last item on the agenda is just noting some of the future events and meetings that are upcoming. Got a note from Diane Katati that at the city council meeting tonight, they'll be appointing 11 members to the first affordable housing oversight committee. And we've been looking forward to that for a long time, a citizen group that could oversee work on the spending of affordable housing bond funds and other program issues. So that's something to celebrate. And you'll note, if you see our agenda, we have several of our coalition meetings coming up in the next month, having our next monthly meeting on the 19th of October. We're having a policy committee meeting a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, September 29th. And we have, let's see, city council public hearing on Braggtown Rezoning. Expected for November 16th, and many, many other meetings related to affordable housing things in Durham coming up as well. And let's see, Bree, do I turn it back over to you for adjournment?
Nope, you can do the adjournment.
Okay, thanks to everyone for joining us today. I know there's many things going on in this crazy world, and we're always delighted to see a good turnout for our monthly meeting here. You can continue to add questions to the chat that we'll continue to monitor and respond to as best we can. Special thanks to Sheldon and Donna for giving us our detailed presentations today on emergency housing and the COVID. And thanks everyone for struggling through technological changes on being with us today. Thanks so much, and hope to see you soon. Or at least our monthly meeting next month.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.